Hey, welcome to X-Oriente, the new voice of Brotherhood. Hey, look, our new logo's up.
Hey, look at
Oh
that.
man, I screwed that one up, but we'll get it right eventually.
Oh, it faded
Here's the
nicely.
problem. Some of these effects, like
Yeah.
you cannot see them. Hi, Brett. You cannot see them unless you're live. So like I'll set it all up and then I'm like, I hope it works. I hope it works.
Yeah.
But
Well,
well, what are you gonna do?
I know. Hi, Alan. How are you? All right. All
So
right.
today we're gonna talk about Masonic Burnout, which is
Thanks, everyone. Have a great night.
which is which is kind of
Sorry.
just kind of great because like
Yeah.
I'm sitting here in Chicago. It is literally I think like 8 degrees Fahrenheit. Um,
It's like 40 here. It's great.
Joe is on with us. Hello, Joe.
Hello, Joe.
Joe
I,
says that
I am.
you're
I
looking
am
older.
looking older.
Yeah.
It was my birthday yesterday, Joe. Thank you. Yes, indeed. Norbert's here. Hi, Norbert.
So today we want to talk about Masonic Burnout, and I don't know, are you burned out?
Oh, yeah. I've been burned out for a long time. For a long time. Yeah. I wish, I have a very old dog right now, and I'm getting a very old dog whiff as he's sitting right below me. That's my burnout right there. I wish
Nice,
you could all smell this out in the internet.
very nice, very
Actually,
nice.
this is probably what the internet smells like if you could smell the internet.
Certain
Just
parts of it, for sure.
most of it, yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, I went through my burnout period. I think I'm uh, kind of emerging from it now. Um, but
That's good. That's
yeah,
good news.
yeah. So I kind of wanted to just sort of start to explore this because I think I've been reading a couple of essays and I can see that there are people. I mean, social media is always kind of a bad you know
Sure.
thing to kind of
Right. Gauge your,
gauge your yeah
gauge anything.
gauge the health of any institution.
Right.
Um, but it does seem to that it does happen, and I think it
Hmm.
happens to the best of us. And um, I guess how do you know, Jason, when you're experiencing Masonic burnout? I mean,
You know, I,
what is it?
for me, um, it's a really good question. I mean, um, it, I suppose I shouldn't be burned out, right? Because I mean, for the most part, I mean, I've listened. I have. I'm not a member of, you know, 800 different bodies and things like that. Um, in fact, um, I, I've really limited myself to my mother lodge, the lodge I started with some friends,
Hmm.
and the Scottish Rite, which I don't really go to, and kind of Rosicrucians, and that's it. And I've gone a couple times to that, but I shouldn't be burned out technically, but I mean, I work 8 hours a
You
day.
work in masonry,
Yeah,
so
right. And so I get
you
I
get
get plenty every
exposed
day.
every day. Yeah.
Yeah, I get plenty every day. So I go to even less today than I have before, and it's probably been about a year or so
Hmm.
that I've really just almost shut down. I hardly go to anything now. And I mean, this is just me being being very, very honest and very real. So sorry.
No.
Uh,
But you know what? Here's the thing. Like you don't. That's not
I
true.
don't. I yeah, well,
That's not true because you do go to stuff, but you go to stuff. It's work related for you, right?
some of it, yeah,
Because
some of
you're
it.
we're having the Grand Lodge Leadership Conference
Sure,
and we're having
sure,
the
sure, sure.
yeah.
I mean, yeah, I mean, there are a couple of mandatory things, but really, you know, grand visitations. Last year, I was an appointed officer, and I probably went to two grand visitations. I just my thing is that uh, if I could be bluntly honest about it, it's just that I see how the sausage is made,
Hmm.
And so sometimes I just want to go home and decompress and not think about it.
Right.
And so, you know, but some years are better than others in that regard. But I can tell when I feel really like burnt out because I can't get myself off the couch to go to a meeting,
Hmm.
right? And even though I know that getting out the door is the hard part, once I get to the meeting, you know, I'm refreshed, I'm rejuvenated. I love being there with my brothers,
Hmm.
but you know, it's getting out that door. That's how I can tell I'm burned out. Is that it's just really hard for me to get out the door.
Yeah.
Even at super fun events, lodge socials, the happy hours. It's just you know, but that's how I can kind of tell, and that'll last for a little while, and then it goes away, right? And then you're back into the saddle again, I guess. And then I'll go to a bunch of stuff, and then I'll be like, I've just too much,
Hmm.
it's almost like I feel like it almost like it eats my life away from me, you know.
Hmm.
Um, but again, I don't have as much of an excuse as others because I've kept my involvement down to a couple of things.
Hmm.
Um, wise people told me don't go running out and joining absolutely everything. Everybody wants you. Everybody wants you for a leadership position. Just take your time, slow
Yeah.
down. And I credit that actually with my mother lodge, the BBF. They told me right away, please don't. Just come to lodge, keep coming to lodge, be a member first,
Hmm.
and then you can think about doing other things. But be a member first. Learn what this is all about. Take your time. The masonry will be there for you forever. So
So when you became you, what lodge were you master of?
I was the master of the colonial.
The Colonial. And
Yeah.
did you? So that was a relatively new lodge.
Yeah.
Where
Yeah.
did you start
I
in the
was
line?
I was the second chartered master. So after chartering, I was technically the third because we did a year under dispensation.
Uh huh.
And then my friend Paul was the first master, chartered master, and then my friend Andrew Ryder was the dispensation master, and then I was the second master of that lodge.
So you would have started in the line then what at junior warden,
Senior warden.
senior warden. Okay, so yeah, so
Yeah.
you
Oh, well, I mean, oh, yeah, yeah. No, you're 100% right. Yeah. So when we were under dispensation, I was the junior warden, but yeah, the charter says I'm the senior warden. So
yeah.
yeah, it was fast. And it's funny. I look back on it. I was 100% completely unprepared in almost every way to be master, and I knew it, and I really disliked my time as master. I did not do a good job as a master.
Hmm.
Um, I was a terrible master, and I mean,
Don't hold back.
well, I mean, you've got to be honest about things,
No,
right? I mean,
it's true. It's
if I
true.
can be honest, if I can be honest about other people and other things, right? Outwardly, I should be honest with myself.
Yeah.
I was a really bad master, and and I knew I was going to be a bad master because I didn't want to be master. And they
Mm.
kind of made me do it because it was a new lodge. And it was only a few guys, and I love the idea of the lodge. I didn't want to I didn't want to have to be responsible for it. And it's funny because it's totally growing up, right? If I
Hmm.
knew then what I know now, it would have been fine, right? If I would have been a better mason, if I would have been a more mature man, I would have been a good master, maybe a
Hmm.
decent master, a passable one, but but not not then. I was not great, and I wasn't
Yeah.
ready for it. And again, you get when you get shoved into something like that, that can cause burnout real fast too, right? Right?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
yeah, because the responsibility kind of overwhelms you. Now, I felt at the time, um, I remember feeling slightly overwhelmed, not totally, but slightly overwhelmed by the responsibility. But it wasn't the responsibility of like, oh my god, I got to come up with programming and blah blah blah. We weren't there yet. But the responsibility I felt was like, if I don't go and open this lodge, like if I don't do this, it dies. Like it just goes away and no one will care. And so like that was tough, you know, it was really tough.
That's true, and that's an interesting feeling, because I think a lot of us who are active kind of take that on ourselves, that
Mm-hmm.
if we don't do it, it doesn't get done, and the lodge will die and no one will care, and so there's a lot of pressure, I think, on some people, not everybody in the lodge, certainly, but
Yeah.
like you have like this sort, in any given lodge, you're going to have this sort of core group of guys that are kind of, they're the first ones to volunteer. They're the ones who are kind of, running things.
Mm-hmm.
Um, uh, and those are the ones I think that are more susceptible to burnout. Right.
Sure.
And I would say, like, if you're, like, in terms of like recognizing whether you're kind of going through a burnout phase, if you're feeling like, you know, you'd rather do something trivial than to go to lodge. If you feel like, you know, like you start to nitpick, and you start to like find more flaws, right? There's a lot of flaws in the fraternity, and there's a lot of like, nitpicking and stuff, politics and all kinds of stuff that, like, it's like any institution, it's like any organization, right? But um uh if you're getting to that point where you're just starting to think like, I don't need this, right?
Yeah.
That's
Sure.
a definite sign of
It's
Masonic
not
burnout.
just it's not just that I don't need this. I think
Yeah.
it's more I don't want this. You know, if you're
What's the
finding,
difference?
I think the difference is that like need. I mean, it's a Maslow thing, right? You know, need and a want are two different things. Um, and masonry is in no way a need for anyone. You know, it really isn't. It's a want. And if masonry is a need for you, you're masoning wrong. You know, it ought to be a want.
Hmm.
Um, and when you're, I mean, it's a total voluntary organization and all that stuff. But if you're volunteering to not go, you know,
Yeah.
that's some burnout right there.
Yeah.
Uh, Joe just jumped in. The officer system provides years of preparation from the bottom for a reason. His first office was junior warden, and I'm sure my first mastership compares unfavorably with Jason's. There you go, right? And yeah, you know, that's what's interesting too is that when Joe uh, became a Mason, I think that the lodge was even more. They were having even more of a problem back then because all of Joe's generation basically didn't join, and so when Joe walked into the door, they must have just been salivating, like, "Oh my God, look at it's a young college educated
Fresh
man,
meat. Yeah.
fresh meat." Yeah. So like, yeah. I mean, think about that. And
Yeah.
and Joe's right. There is a reason why you rise that it takes a long time to get through an officer line, or it should take you a long time to get through an officer line, because it prepares you. It slowly builds you up. It gives you experience, you know. And here's a shocking one, right? I'd never ever sat in an officers meeting previous to starting my own lodge.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
What were you
never.
thinking?
I know. So clearly I was not. But I mean,
um,
like that's exactly what Joe and I guess are talking about, which is that like there's a reason that they prep you for these things,
yeah.
and that there's a long kind of a process of learning to it.
Yeah. But
Um,
even so, I
yeah,
mean, that climb, and I did
sure.
mine. Uh, let's see, where did I start? I've held every office except Tyler and junior warden, and I skipped junior warden because the guy who was in front of me moved suddenly to Puerto Rico.
God, that sucks.
Um,
Junior
yeah.
warden is the best officer position. I defy you, internet. to tell me that there is a better officer position than junior warden, because there is not.
Yeah. Well,
You get
I
a
missed that, I guess. Yeah.
listen, you get a great seat. You hardly have any lines, right? And yet everyone, kind of counts on you. You're the glory boy. It's wonderful. It's the best officer position, bar none. Period.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I enjoyed
That
all
sucks.
of them. I enjoyed
I know,
all of
but-
them, but it was
okay.
the stuff. It was the management side of things that got me a little burned out.
It's tough.
And when I got,
If you're doing it right, it's tough. I did
Yeah.
not do it right.
yeah, and by the time I got out of the East, man, I was glad it was over. Like I would do it again if I was called to do it again. Yeah, it just like by the time I got out of there, I was just like, oh, stop, like, and luckily luckily or unluckily for me, like I had just started grad school then. And so I basically, my Masonic, and even though I still made it to lodge and stuff like that, just my ability to like inject, energy into running it, making programs, stuff. I mean, even the show went on pretty much of a hiatus for 2.5 years, while I, kind of sorted all that out. So let's talk for a second about like, what causes Masonic burnout, right? The first cause is organizational politics, right? I mean, that can really burn a guy out.
Yeah, it's really tough.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's interesting about that, I don't think you can get away from it. It just is. It exists.
Yeah.
But you're 100% right, and it's understanding how to deal with it and kind of process it, and hopefully move yourself past it a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I think that's you talk about another way that Masonry prepares you for real life and prepares you for being out in the workforce, being a good friend, those kind of things.
Mm-hmm.
All of those places, each place has its own kind of political dynamic to it.
Yeah.
And so if you're able to kind of work yourself through that in your lodge or in Masonry, in your Grand Lodge, I guess, or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
right? If you're able to kind of deal with that and kind of move beyond it a little bit, it will serve you well everywhere else.
Yeah. I just think that sometimes, I mean, having been on the receiving end of some
Sure.
nasty political stuff, it sometimes you can't avoid it, right? It comes for you.
Sure. No, absolutely. What is that? I don't go looking for trouble. Trouble finds me.
Yeah. It's pretty much,
Yeah.
it's pretty much
Sure.
how it goes. I'd say a big cause is when you overextend your commitments, right?
Yeah.
So, and I see this a
Big
lot.
time.
I see this a lot with new Masons,
Mm-hmm.
where they, they're really enthusiastic. They're really excited. They're looking for more light. They start, I'm just laughing at Mike. Mike Moser is he's taking offense at my jersey. These are the colors
you,
of
Mike.
Moses. Have you not seen the Ten Commandments?
Don't. Shh. Mike is getting a love.
Okay.
Good job, Mike.
Yeah. So
I assume he's talking about the Washington Capitals, but keep your mouth shut, Mike.
Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. So overextending commitment. So
Yeah.
you get especially by young Masons, I mean newer Masons, they get really enthusiastic, and of course, everybody is right there with the petition, to sign them up for every appendant body under the sun,
Mhm.
and quickly they become overextended.
Yeah. Brett Simon just popped in and said, as a newly raised Mason, I'm not there yet for burnout, but I observe others and recognize the need for moderation, or I'll be them before I know it.
Yeah.
100%, Brett.
Yeah. So Brett, this show is for you. This is
correct.
This show is dedicated to Brett Simon,
Yeah.
and all those who are like him.
Yeah.
Are, newly raised and enthusiastic, and don't tamp down the enthusiasm, but just be wary of what you're taking on. We'll talk about like how to hit the reset button a
Sure.
little bit later on in the show. I guess another cause of burnout is disillusionment, right? Is like you came for something and
Hmm.
you found something else. Maybe you had visions
Sure.
of the lodge that were, that you saw in a movie or read about or heard people talk about, and then you got to your lodge and you were just like, really, this is it,
Yeah, and I'd take that maybe one step further and say, for the Mason who's been around for a while, and has been able to kind of observe things and then said, yeah, I'm going to jump in the line. I think I've got something to say here, and I think I can move this forward in a bit. And when they find out that their wheels are just spinning in the mud, that causes burnout, because when no one will listen to you and no one will uh, hear you, you can only yell at that wall for so long,
right?
before you just walk away and find somewhere else to go.
Yeah. And I've read a few essays of, why I left Masonry.
That's right.
And
Yeah.
I what breaks my heart when I read those is I think to myself, there was an alternate path. Like, you didn't have to walk away.
Hmm.
But I see people who do that. I remember the case of one Masonic author who, and this happens, unfortunately it happens, where you get some amount of success and notoriety, from maybe you publish a book or you publish a paper that people like, or and there's a lot of people who are, super eager to take you down a peg, and then you
Yeah.
become a
Sure.
target. And
100%.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. It's the second album, right? You can make one hit album, no problem.
Hmm.
It's the second one, and it's not because you've used all your good creative ideas. It's because there's a lot of haters after the first time. After your first success, there are a lot of people waiting to chop you down.
Yeah. So
Um,
Joe says, prime symptom of burnout: you can't think of anything in the craft you want to do.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, absolutely.
See, that's why
I-
Crociata gets the big bucks.
It's 100% right. Absolutely.
Yeah. So another cause on my list of causes is, which is kind of related to disillusionment, is dissatisfaction with the rate of change. Right? Is that this is a really, 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 really tough organization to change, and I think it is because we're so committed to tradition, that it's hard for us to modernize. Um,
Hmm.
it's just everything. It's it. I think it's, we talk about, like, and we've discussed this before on the show, like the body of Masonry is sacrosanct, and it is not in the power of any man to change anything in the body of Masonry, but that's the body of Masonry, right? Everything else is sort of
Right.
open
Yeah.
for business.
Hmm.
And so I think what happens is people sort of look at the way things are being done and run and being like, this is ridiculous. Why are we doing it? And it's just that it's on a momentum of its own,
Sure. Absolutely. Uh, you know, I just want to pop in. Jason Hacker posted, I think, is really great, and I think it probably speaks to a lot of people who would be kind of listeners / viewers of the show. I found myself charging at Masonry like it was this course in school that I would finish and hopefully have a great grade A. However, finally to realize that it's a lifelong journey that's just begun, and to slow down, enjoy the journey, because it's so much easier said than done, like so many other things, right? Is that
Yeah.
you've got to circumscribe your passions. Hey, look at that. I just did that.
Yeah.
And it really is. And I think that for me, Jason's experience is just like mine. It was like, no, I got to be the best at this. Like, just a hard charger. Like I do things well,
Yeah.
but you're
Yeah,
gonna just
I was like that too.
crash
When I
it.
first
Yeah,
became a Mason,
right.
I became super
We're
ambitious, and
we're
I'd be
type
like,
A like that.
I'd be
Exactly.
like, ooh, what's that guy? Oh,
Mm-mm.
that's a 33rd. What's that? Like I'd be like, ooh,
How do I get that?
yeah, how do I do that? Like I want to,
Yeah.
and so you start looking around, and you start, you start mentally like, okay, I'm going to do that, and I'm going to do that, and
Yep.
I'm going to do that
Right.
because I got to get it
Absolutely.
all, and then it'll
Uh-huh.
be done, right?
Right. Exactly.
And I
Exactly.
actually know a guy. I've very good friends with a guy who that kind of happened to him. Right?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
He got everything. He got he pretty much everything you're going to get. He got
Uh-huh.
the 33rd. He got
Sure.
the the honors and
The
he
KYCH.
he had all of it.
Sure. Sure.
And then he just went. I'm kind of done now. And so so that's a kind of a thing. And then of course interpersonal issues. Right? There's always that where you rub up against somebody that is just rubbing you the wrong way, and you can't seem to work it out.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of times too we try to I, I don't think there's enough intervention when you have two people who are really kind of going mano a mano in a lodge to sort of mediate and unpack that
Mm-hmm.
and try to say, okay, how can we all get along? And so what typically happens is one person wins and the other person sort of decides, I've had it, I'm done, I'm out of here.
Yeah.
And then finally, the final one is just boredom, right? Like when your lodge life is just, I hear this all the time in social media, like all we do is pay bills and argue about, what roofing vendor to hire to,
Right.
right.
Sure.
Is this all masonry
Yeah.
is? Well,
Yeah.
no,
Right.
but Mike Hambrick says 2.5 years in and I still haven't slowed down. Mike,
That's a fact.
you're a pup. You're a pup. you're still, yeah, you're just hitting Masonic puberty, my friend. Yeah, but point taken. And here's the thing, like Mike, I think Mike's done a very smart thing, and we'll talk about what that is in just a few minutes. What he's done is partially what what are my recommendations for how to fix burnout when it happens.
Mm-hmm.
But I wanted to hear, like, what do you think? Like, how do you? So you're in a burned out state. Like, what's your Dr. Jason? What's your prescription? More cowbell.
Right. I wait it out. I'm just gonna wait it out. We're gonna see how it goes. Honestly, there is for me. There's no real prescription other than patience, right? Because it'll come back. You've got to miss something. What is that? If you love someone, set them free. And so, hopefully, that it comes back slowly, and it will. It's happened to me before where I've gotten burned out and I just do nothing. And it usually lasts for a little while, and then all of a sudden I'll be like, ooh, I want to go do that. Oh, I want to go and see that. And then it ramps up again. Right. With me, it's more difficult to moderate that because I've got the 8-hour a day job.
Right.
And so it tends, no matter what I do, it tends to crush in on me.
Right.
And so I kind of go in waves.
You're like Michael Corleone. Like,
that's exactly
pull me back in. Right?
They pull me back in. Right. So
yeah. So I would say that's a pretty good first step. That's a good.
Sure.
That's like the first step of triage, right?
Yeah.
But so I kind of have like what is it, like 5 steps, 6 steps?
Look at you.
I know. I'm like.
I know. You're just
I've got it all written down. It's all on a card,
That's right.
But that's the first step to fix Masonic burnout. To me, the first step is to disengage, like just disentangle yourself. You need to let everything kind of settle.
Sure.
Right. And that means like just getting some distance between you and the craft. Right. You don't have to feel guilty. Like people, the thing about Masonry, which is really great, is that it's a lifelong pursuit. Right. It's going to be there. Right. It's going to be there, you know, you can bow out for a few years while
Right.
you raise your young kids, or while you
Hmm.
have a really demanding job, or because there's going to become a time when you don't have a really demanding job, or you know, your kids get a little older and they can watch themselves and you can go to lodge and it's not a big deal, right? So um you know, don't don't feel guilty about that, but I think disconnecting for a little while and just letting everything settle down, getting some distance is good, right? It's a
Hmm.
good it's a good thing to do. Um, the second thing is then to sort of internally start a reconnection process, right? And the way that I would recommend doing that is to say, what is it that drew you to Masonry in the first place? You know, what is it that you loved about, you know, what got you excited when you were going through your degrees, right? Was it the unknown aspect of it? Was it the fact that you were, you felt like you were joining something special? Was it the guys that you just really liked hanging out? You know, one of the things that's really interesting is like, so I'm coming on my 20-year, this September will be my 20th year having been raised.
Wow.
Right. So we'll do a big celebration. It'll be great. But,
Party hats.
party
Love it.
hats, lapel pins, woo, you know,
Huge fan.
but what's interesting is that all the guys that I hung out in lodge with, almost all of them, uh, I don't see anymore. Like they've either moved away, they've, you know, a couple of them,
Yeah.
it's
Some of
funny.
that.
It's funny because there were four guys. There were four guys who went up the degrees with me, right?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And one of them lives in Canada. Like
Hmm.
he moved away
Hmm.
like just a few years after I was raised. But we still kind of stay in touch. And he said, "Hey, Eric, it's our 20th year. We should do a big thing, right?" So we contacted all four of the guys that were in this, like, and we were really close knit. We were really close
Hmm.
as a class. And one of them let his membership lapse, and the other one's living in Puerto Rico. You know, like it's
Right. Sure.
right. So it's
It's funny. Because here, people. I mean, this is such a transient city that people are here and gone. I honestly, I don't even know if I don't know anybody from my class
yeah,
at all. I know one of them. I know one of them freaked out. Uh, I don't even know if he got raised, but he freaked out. I remember and someone just being like, "Nah, found Jesus." Like,
wow,
yeah, and was like, yeah, and hard. Yeah, he's out.
yeah,
And so like, that's the only thing I remember about my class,
right,
which is terrible, right? I mean, it's funny because the class after me became really close to each other. And I remember looking at them being like, oh, I wish. And like, and actually in the class in front of me was really close with each other as well.
yeah,
But it just, it was it was tough. Uh, and then yeah, it's a bummer.
yeah,
It's a
yeah. But
total
but
bummer.
it's normal.
Yeah, I
I
mean,
think
you
that
totally.
it's
Yeah,
a
no, no, no.
normal phenomenon, and so
Yeah,
don't be afraid. Like, you know,
yeah,
you'll disengage with the. But look, when I see those people, you know, it's like old times. So it's
sure,
you know,
sure.
right. So figure out like what it is that you loved about the fraternity, and just you don't have to do anything with that yet. Just figure it out and hold it in your mind. So, you know, maybe it was the ritual that really kind of got you excited, or maybe it was the ideas or the symbolism that were, you know, that's inherent in the craft. Maybe it's the lessons that it taught. Maybe it's the history of Freemasonry, right? So figure out what it is that really kind of got you jazzed, right? This is advice that I gave to a friend of mine who was going through a career crisis, right? And I said, what is it that you love about what you do? And at that time, that person was working in market research, right?
Hmm.
Um, and that person said to me, "Well, I really love looking at a bunch of data and being able to unpack a story, right, around
Hmm.
data." And I thought,
Sure,
that's
absolutely.
really profound, right? So
It is.
what you're telling me is that you became a researcher to be able to tell stories. That makes you a storyteller, right? So it's like you have to kind of figure out like and reframe it what it is that you love, right? So that you can then start to build on that. That becomes like it's almost like you're raising the building, you're clearing off the platform, and now you're going to start building something new,
Hmm.
right? That's different from
Yeah.
what burns you out.
Nathan Tweedy popped in and said, what if the reasons I joined are different from what I enjoy now? And that's exactly what we're talking about, right? And he says he joined for the charity, but he stayed for the knowledge.
Yeah.
100%. Steve Orr. Hi, Steve. Good to see you. Masonry for me is about the ritual, the association with good guys, and most importantly about the charities. Here's the key. It's a lifestyle, right? So for him, it's the lifestyle. It's the whole thing. And I think that's exactly what you're talking about, right? Is that you have to really analyze it, get it in your head, jumble it around, and then find that thing, then go, oh, that's what it was.
Yeah.
Right.
It doesn't have to be like, you don't have to feel like it's just one thing or two things and then everything else is like, like you might enjoy everything about it,
Mm-hmm.
but the things that make you most passionate about it, that make you most into it, that is what's going to carry you when things get a little tough, right?
Mm-hmm.
So then the next step is once you're clear on what you want, then you need to make a plan on how you're going to get there, right? And a key to this plan is making sure that your internal happiness, right, is not dependent on the whim of somebody else, right? So if what you want is a perfect example. If what you want is to get a 33rd degree, right? Stop. Just stop, because you're not in control of that. And didn't they say something like, if you ask for it, you'll never get it? Or there's some kind of tradition like
That's
that,
exactly
right?
it, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Seek it and you'll never obtain it.
Right. So
Yeah.
it's kind of like if your happiness is dependent on somebody granting you something, don't bother, because it's just going to drive you crazy, and you may get what you
Absolutely.
want, but it's going to be bitter. Like, you're not, like, the things that you're going to have to do in order to make that happen. If that's what's driving you, right,
Yeah.
it's just gonna, like, it's gonna burn you out even faster. Right.
Absolutely. 100%.
So
100%.
that's why it's important to do the second step before you do the plan, right? Because the second step is going to connect you to what you love, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's
Mm-hmm.
I guarantee you it's not going to be. I mean, put it this way, I would hope it's not going to be about the jewel or the the
Yeah.
fancy apron or the gold bullion or whatever that's hanging off those things, right? It's going to be about something in the experience that you came to Masonry for. And then step 4 is to remember that there's a marked difference between achievement in rank and achievement in effect, right? There's plenty of grandmasters in the world who went down in history nearly forgotten, right? The only way we remember them is because they're on a roll of grandmasters. It's like, oh yeah, this guy in 1972 was grand,
Mm-hmm.
It's not to say that they didn't do a good job. It's just that, like, if that, the fact that you're at a certain rank doesn't mean a whole lot in the grand scheme of things in Masonry, unless serving the fraternity is what is most appealing to you. If what's most appealing to you is mentoring and shepherding and working in the organization, then great, go for it. But that's what you're focused on, not the attainment of rank. You know what I mean?
Yeah. 100%.
And then there are other guys who have had a profound effect on Masonry, who never went beyond Master Mason,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah, absolutely. Before this comment goes away, I feel like we should talk about it real quick. Jesse Hopkins Howell says, I feel like one of the keys to staving off Masonic burnout is traveling. Visiting other lodges allows us to transcend our normal groupthink. Traveling renews the spirit, both in exposure to new brothers and to new ideas and customs, all within the same familiar and comfortable ritual work. Right?
Yeah.
He's 100% right. I think.
Yeah.
And it's, I've actually found more than once that traveling for work, I will go out and I will hang out with a different group of Masons who have a different worldview than what I'm used to here in DC, and I come back refreshed and ready to go. Because when you do that, when you kind of get with with people that are outside of your bubble, it tends to reset everything. And I would come back and I would be like, I'm ready to go. I'm ready to do this again
Yeah.
because, I'm fired up.
Yeah.
These guys really got me. And I have been told, like, listen, because I remember once traveling for a leadership conference, and I think it was in St. Louis, and talking to a group of young Masons, and I was just like, I'm just burnt out. Like, I do this, every day, and I just, and I deal with a lot of politics and a lot of that kind of garbage, and it tends to get me down every once in a while. And I remember them being like, shut up, stop wallowing in yourself. That's just dumb. like, oh, so your job is hard? Oh, yeah, ours is super easy. And we just come home all happy all the time, ready to go to lodge. And like, leave it at work. That's your work.
Yeah.
Yeah, it has to do with the lodge, but it's still your work. Shut up. Like, grow up, be an adult. And I was like, that's fair. Totally fair. And like, it popped me out of it again, where I'm like, oh, yes, they're 100% right. Like, I really have to kind of leave that away. Now, it was a lot easier to do because I was working for the Scottish Rite at the time. And so, you could leave the Scottish Rite, go to your Blue Lodge again, dive into your Blue Lodge, and it's totally different. These days, it's not so easy, but I don't know if that trick will work again. But I agree that traveling, I mean, it's really cool. You go out and hang out with a new group of guys in a different lodge, and it really it'll expand your mind again.
Yeah,
and
I'll tell you that saved me from burnout. That's what
100%.
that's the thing that really did it for me, because I started going to Masonic Week, right, pretty early on in my Masonic career, and it was just seeing how DC Masons operated and seeing how Masons in Missouri and Masons in Iowa and Masons in Oklahoma,
Texas,
and talking to those guys about what they were doing, and Virginia, and it was refreshing, and because I could meet people who were interested in the same things that I was interested in, now my Masonic network got much bigger. So if you're like, this happens a lot where people will they'll write us and they'll say things like, well, it's great for you, but I live in this small town and the lodge is, it's ossified, and there's really not much change that's possible and stuff like that. And
by the way, your phone is blowing up. Probably it's giving
know.
you a ding right now because you used the word ossified in a sentence. It's right now serious flipping her nuts.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
But yeah, traveling really was the cure for that, because once I saw
Totally.
how other Masons were doing it, it gave me ideas. It gave me hope, right? If they can do it, we can do it, and a lot of the things that I learned from New York, from DC, we took back to our own lodge, and we do it too now, and it's a little different than the way it's done in New York, but it's we kind of made it our own, right?
100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
So
it brought you some joy.
yeah, so that was point number 5, right?
Okay.
And then the point number 6 is really about, once you're clear on what it is that makes you happy in the fraternity, focus on that and leave everything else behind. And if that means you have to like leave an appendant body, go for it. Leave it. Like it'll be there for you if you ever want to go back. They're happy to take your money. They're happy to put you back on the rolls. No one's going to be like, well, where have you been? Like it's kind of an open system. But once you start to focus on what it is that you love, then you can get past the burnout. And for me, like, it was starting a podcast, right? And so at the time when X-Oriente started, like, podcasting was like super new. Nobody was really doing it, right? And what was really exciting to me, which few people, I think, outside of Masonic Week were discussing, were about the ideas and the philosophy of Freemasonry and how it impacts today's living, right? And that was sort of the genesis of the show, was that I wanted to talk about stuff like this when I would start to talk about this in, in my home lodge, they were still arguing over whether John Robinson's book was proper history or not, or,
Hmm.
this is at the time when books like the Hiram Key were out.
Yeah.
People were like,
Sure. Yeah.
you know, you know, arguing about, whether the Scottish Masons or the English Masons were the first Masons, so,
Right.
so it was like still very historically minded and stuff like that. I think, I think that, since this show and the other, Masonic podcasts that have come out, I think have really kind of opened up the conversation to more, uh, kind of more modern aspects of it. And so that's a good thing,
Hmm.
but
And it's in some ways it can be traveling without having to leave your house,
yeah,
right?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so.
You find other people out there that have a similar worldview as you do.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I agree. Um,
So
yeah.
I guess for for burnout purposes, if you're burned out, what would be really interesting is if we could get all the people who feel burned out in masonry together.
Right.
What could we do with that? Like, I mean, it could be
Right.
disastrous, but it could be really cool. Like we could
More than likely it'll
something
be disastrous.
so, no,
You know,
something could really really good could come of it.
right. I had this. I just had. By the way, you because you kept using the word burnout over and over, and for whatever reason, Cruciate is still in my head, and all I can think of is him giving um, the Groucho Marx burnout. Well, if you burn out, just light it back up; it'll be fine. Smoking a cigar at me. I don't know why I had that in my head, but I did. But yeah, I mean, you're right. I would love to like just stick a whole bunch of burned out Masons together because I think what's really funny about it is that you stick a whole bunch of burned out Masons together, they'd walk out and be like, "Yeah, I've got like 10 ideas. I'm ready to go again."
Yeah.
I think that's really funny.
It could be a cool,
Right, right.
like you
Or
could do
you'd
it
start
almost like a clinic,
right.
like you come, you know,
They'd walk out, or they walk out the door and they start the Grand Lodge of the United States.
you know, yeah,
Too
no,
soon? Sorry.
yeah. um, here's my question: has anybody ever done a proper Masonic retreat?
Mm,
I've never heard of one. Where
yeah, I mean, like,
where you like go to some
sure,
mountain
yeah, sure, yeah.
resort or something,
Yeah.
and
I mean, yeah, they do.
do they?
So in Colonial, I know the officers do a retreat. There are a couple of brothers who have a cabin out in West Virginia, and the officers every year, and they invite everybody, but the officers definitely go together, and they spend a whole weekend, out in the wilds of West Virginia, with just being in a cabin together, and then planning for the year and things like that, and that's really cool, and it's a lot of fun. They spend a great weekend together. They do a little bit of work, but it's not a lot. It's just a little bit of work together where they kind of hash through a few things. And then when they're done with that, the rest of the weekend is spent, drinking and playing board games, and just enjoying each other's company. So they do that. I mean, a lot of like these leadership conferences, right? A lot of like Grand Lodge leadership conferences and things like that. That's primarily their goal, is to be sort of a retreat in a way. They might have like it might be set up like a conference, right, where you've got tracks and classes and things like that you're doing, but really what you're there for is the networking. It's there to get out of your lodge and into the greater body. In a lot of ways, I think that's what Masonic Week is for me, right? Is it's a retreat in a way, because I'm outside of a lodge environment and I'm just hanging out with good friends, old and new, and talking about masonry in a very informal way. Shelley's is a perfect retreat for that. I mean, you have to
That's
burn your
true.
clothes afterwards,
That's
but it's
true,
a
and
perfect,
it's and it's
perfect
funny.
place
Like
for it.
I was just thinking, it was much more so when when you could smoke in the lobby of the Hotel Washington,
That's right.
right? And
Hmm.
all these guys would like be, you'd have to like cut a hole in the cigar smoke to like walk through. Um, but yeah, it was like a retreat because everything was there,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And you're kind of, and you're still, I don't know, you're away from that lodge environment, but you're still with Masons, you're in a lodge environment, I guess.
Yeah.
Right? Right? And it's refreshing and it's a lot of fun. And you end up having these really incredible conversations with people, and it actually goes pretty quick. Where you'll click with these guys, and you'll be like, oh my god, and then all of a sudden you're in this incredibly deep conversation, or a fun argument with someone, and you'll just be like, oh my god, I can't believe how cool this is and how fast this
Yeah.
happened.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I love the idea of retreats, whether you do it with your lodge, or if you do it by yourself and do it like Masonic Week, like we're talking about. 100%, they're really great. And a lot of times when you do that and you kind of get yourself out, especially if it's an overnight thing,
Uh-huh.
it gives you time by yourself then to unpack all those conversations and all the things that you've done or talked about with other people,
Yeah. Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
by yourself.
I usually bring a
And
notebook with me, and it's usually
yeah,
filled up by the time I'm,
yeah.
you know.
And it's right. And it's time by yourself to kind of process what happened. And that's really valuable as well. So yeah.
Yeah, so Dan Kellum says that he's
Mhm.
starting to feel burned out, mostly due to feeling like he's trapped between family, work, and masonry.
There you go. Yeah, it's a rut, right? Because it's like anything that's scheduled. You do it long enough, and most days I don't remember driving to work. I'm just there all of a sudden, uh, you know, and and I think that Dan, you bring up a good point, and that's exactly what we're talking about. That is Masonic burnout right there,
Yeah.
and you've got to do something about it, or don't, or take a step back for a little bit, refocus on something else, and come back, because that's 100% Masonic burnout,
Yeah.
and that can be life burnout as well, right? Because when you've got everything structured and now you're just sort of on autopilot, you
Yeah.
know
Yeah.
what are you going to do? You've got to, sometimes you got to have a little adventure in your life, and so you got to figure out where you're gonna put that adventure. I think that masonry is a really good safe place to put your adventure in life, right? Maybe start going to a different lodge, maybe start, maybe, or take a month or two, 6 month break, and then go back, walk in the door and see what happens, right? Um, yeah,
Yeah.
there you go. He said my lodge needs me in a chair, so I'm trying to help. That's tough, you know.
Yeah.
If it works for you, great. Like if you're happy about that, awesome. But if you're not, you're not gonna do it well,
Yeah. I think
you
I
know.
think I think part of that, Dan, is that you have to pay attention to your cable toe, right? Because the thing about that too is that um and this can be kind of hard when you're dealing especially with, like, spouses and children and things like that, where you need a certain amount of time in the month to devote to the craft,
Hmm.
and you certainly need a certain amount of time to devote to work, and that often is elastic demand, right? So, like, sometimes you're super busy and sometimes you're not super busy. um, but I think it's important to basically, carve out a space for that, and make that your space, and negotiate with your family to say, well, here's how much time that we can spare you for Masonic activities, and with the knowledge that it can't be zero, right? Like,
Yeah,
this is
sure.
something that's important to you. It is, it is spiritually nourishing for you. And so, that in any negotiation there's some give and take, but once you figure out what that time allotment is, then you can decide to start to prioritize what's most important to you. And you know what, your lodge may need you, but that may not be what you can give at that point in time, and you
Yeah,
shouldn't, don't let them guilt you into it, right?
and there are a bunch of comments now, about this, and read them. They're from very smart people, and they're all right. Richard Vere, sometimes we're not selfish enough. A burned out officer isn't a whole lot of help. Charles Ward, if you're burning out, you'll do yourself and your lodge a favor by saying no.
Yeah.
Joe Crociata, how about putting as much planning into your family as you do your lodge? Those right there, those three, bang, that's your answer.
Yeah.
You know, that's the first part of your sitting down and really thinking this through for yourself and figuring out how to reprioritize things to get yourself out of the rut that you're in.
Yeah.
And those are fantastic comments. I mean, fantastic.
Something
Which, by the way, God bless Masonry, because there it is right there, right? Is as soon as someone said, hey, I'm kind of feeling this way, boom, 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 boom.
Right.
There were brothers in to jump in and help.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. And something that who was it that mentioned was it Richard? Let me go back here. Charles Ward. He was the one who said, do your lodge a favor by saying no. And the power of no. So it reminds me of a story that I read about Steve Jobs. Right?
Sure.
Steve Jobs was sort of grooming Johnny Ive to kind of take over the innovation part of Apple after he had been gone. And he would always tell Johnny Ive, say no to the good things so that you can say yes to the great things. Right. And they had always had this culture at Apple where they would say, we make products that are insanely great. Right. They just had this catchphrase. They didn't really define what insanely great meant, but the idea was like, something is insanely great when you see it, right? Yeah. When you experience it.
I mean, and actually the personification of that story is that Apple had been begged for years to make a cell phone. And Jobs kept saying, no, it doesn't wow me. What's so great about it? Until until multi-touch came out and he went, oh, wait. and then he found something that wowed him. And that's the product that they rolled with, and that worked out just fine for him.
Well, but again, actually, I mean, this is a bit of a digression, but most people forgot the very first phone that Apple made, right? That was a Motorola phone. It was a candy bar phone.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, it was.
And they had to make so many compromises to get. Basically, it was like a stock Motorola candy bar phone, crappy candy bar phone that had iTunes on it. And they made so many compromises. It was such a terrible product that Steve Jobs was like put off of it entirely. And so when he finally got the idea for iPhone, and he got it they had developed the iPad first. When he finally figured it out and said, no, we're going to do it this way. He then went on a rampage and he basically went to the carriers and said, I'm not going to put any of your crapware on my phone. I'm not going to put your logo on my phone. I'm not going to do any of these things that cell phone makers for years had to do just to get their cell phones and their. He said, no. If you don't want it, we'll just sell it. We don't care. And it wound up being a hit, and it put them in many ways ahead of other manufacturers for a long time, until basically a lot of those conventions started to fall away.
Yeah.
Right. But
there it is. I mean, but again, say no to the good.
No. Yeah, you can do that. Mike had asked. I'd mentioned that he was doing something right, and Mike's sitting there going, "What did I do?"
Yeah. Also, Mike's comment is great. The secret Masonic word is no, and try not to make eye contact.
So what Mike is doing right is he's found things in podcasting. He started out kind of behind the scenes, and now he's one of the Masonic Roundtable guys. He found things that were interesting to him that he wanted to talk about, that he wanted to kind of do research on, and so he's kind of focusing in that area, right? And so that means that there's probably a bunch of other things that he's not doing, right? Not that he should be doing those, right? But
Sure.
for example, some people are like really interested in publishing papers, and some people are interested in writing books, and some people are interested, like, find that thing that you really dig in masonry, and go for it.
Yeah.
What's I always say to, like, my students when I teach design, right? I say everybody's got a superpower, right? Everybody has one, right? You don't have to be like Joe Crociato was bitten by a radioactive lawyer and got the power of attorney, right? But
That's
but
terrible.
but everybody has a superpower. Your job is to figure out what your superpower is. What is your gift to the world, and then somehow leverage that into serving the craft with it. And whatever some people are like great wood carvers, and some people are great, artists, and some people are great writers, and some people are great speakers, and some people are great ritualists, and so, like, whatever that thing is that makes you happy, figure out a way to do that in the craft, right? And that'll go a long way to helping. Charles Ward is booing me.
Boo!
It's
Boo
well
this man!
deserved. I totally
That is
deserve
great.
that.
I agree.
Uh, sorry, I lost my train of thought. But
Yeah.
but once when you're doing what you love in the craft, right, you're less likely to hit burnout because you really enjoy what you're doing.
Yeah. I agree
Right?
with that. Totally. 100%.
Cool. So anything else coming out on social media that we should know
Just continuation. Dan saying, sitting in the West this year, being pressured by the younger crowd like me to learn a lecture and to move to the East. Appreciate the advice. Maybe it's time to sit on the sidelines for a year. He said, I just hate to see our lodge struggle to fill chairs. Richard Veer, that being said, just make sure you're not stepping back solely because it's hard. That kind of stress can be extremely rewarding when you're on the other side of it. I agree with that. Doesn't sound like that to me, but I agree with that advice a lot, because do hard things, because when you accomplish them, it feels great, and it prepares you for the next hard thing to do.
Yeah.
But that being said, if you're just burnt out by it and you're not up to the challenge, you don't want the challenge, right? Do yourself a favor and want it.
Yeah.
Give yourself the time to want it, because that's more important. A lifeless master is more harm to a lodge than a guy who says, listen, I have to sit on the sidelines. Like, I can come to some meetings, but I got to take a step back. It's much worse when there's a lifeless master. That really can hurt a lodge.
Yeah.
And it's a hurt that can take a while to get over.
That's true.
So it's better to really investigate your reasons. Why do you feel this way? And once you figure that out, you'll know the answer right away. And then you just have to be strong enough to make the hard choice that you need to make. Whether that's, hey, I'm gonna nut up and go, or is it, I have to take a step back and I have to tell those guys, listen, I know this is disappointing to you right now, but it's for the long-term good. But both of those are hard decisions, to make, and you've got to make those. Mm-hmm. But you can only make them once you've informed that decision by doing a lot of soul searching and figuring out the right thing to do.
Yeah. Cool. I remember when I was first raised,
mm-hmm.
They wanted me to learn a bunch of lectures, and memorization is something that comes pretty hard to me.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if I'm just trying to do it, like, just force memorization.
Me too.
And what I realized is that, like, as a web designer at the time, our lodge had a website.
Mm-hmm.
I think we were the first lodge in Illinois to be on the web, but the website was pretty bare bones, rudimentary. Like, somebody had coded it, in a text editor, and
right.
it looked like, first generation websites. And I knew mm-hmm. that, like, I could design something that was a little more finished and more polished and put a better face on the lodge. And so I said, well, this is what I can do. This is how I can mm-hmm. contribute.
All right, there you go.
So I served as webmaster for 7 or 8 years.
Hmm.
and redesign the website and stuff like that. So whatever it is that you can do, and this is something too I saw a lot in, I saw it in,
It was the best GeoCities website for a Masonic Lodge I've ever seen, by the way. I just want you to know that.
which one?
Yours.
Oh, thanks.
I liked the MIDI music the best. You know, the MIDI music of
With Mozart's
Africa.
Requiem. Oh,
No, it was Africa
Africa.
in MIDI.
Nice.
It was
Yeah.
really nice. I really enjoyed that a
Very
lot.
nice. Very nice.
Yeah.
Um,
You mean our lodge website isn't supposed to look like it was made for Netscape?
it is not. It is not. We should do a show on that. We should do a show.
We
on,
definitely should.
on
Yep.
on lodge websites.
Mhm.
Like that's.
I think it would be really great to censor the name of the lodge, but show up like bad examples of stuff. I think that would be hilarious. It would be really fun.
I'd rather show good examples.
Aww.
I know.
Aww. We just saw our entertainment value go. Ooh.
All right. Well, listen,
okay.
you guys. Couple bits of housekeeping. First of all, thank you to our supporters, our executive producers. Without you, the show doesn't happen. If you'd like to become an executive producer, please visit our Patreon page at patreon.com/X-Oriente. Drop us a line and let us know what you think of the show. If you're experiencing Masonic burnout, let us know. xoriente@gmail.com. Mike Rex is like, I could provide a list of bad websites. Send them. We'll talk.
I can too.
If you're going to be in Masonic Week and you want to meet up, let me know. Drop us a line at xoriente@gmail.com or leave a comment on the Facebook page and we'll do that. And also, we're thinking of like branching out and offering the show on Twitch or maybe live, it's like switching from Facebook to
YouTube.
YouTube. If that's something you'd rather see or rather not, let us know. And then and one other thing, I'll be in New York next week from Tuesday until Friday. So if there's anything in New York Masonically that's going on, please drop me a line and let me know. And I don't know, like it's a work conference, so I'm not sure like what forced fun they're going to have in the evenings. So I'm not sure what evenings I'll be able to get out and actually go out and be able to play.
Jesse Hopkins, hey, can we get the full experience at Masonic Week if we're not York, right? Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. Yes. I can
Yes.
tell you that I don't think I've been to any actual Masonic Week events for many years now. Like I don't really go to them.
I've never been a member of anything that meets during Masonic Week.
Yeah.
In fact, you'll have more fun and you'll have a better Masonic Week experience not being a member of any of those things.
Yeah. I mean, I would say,
Sorry to all of
there
those
are
things.
some things that you can do there. Like Grand College of Rites is open to any Master Mason. There's a couple of things that you can join that don't require York Rite membership, but really that's not why you go to Masonic Week. I mean, it's the excuse, right, that a lot of people use, but between the hospitality suites and the holding court at Shelley's and some of the other events that are going around, it's really your opportunity to go and meet like-minded Masons from around the country, and in many cases from other countries too, because there's a whole British contingent that comes in because they do a bunch of they have the operatives and the Athelstan and the Scarlet Cord and all these sort of British degrees that they're trying to establish in the States. So there's a whole British contingent, so you can talk to those guys. I met a bunch of guys from Romania last year. And again, these days I go to those events when I'm either speaking at them or I'm asked to attend for some reason because maybe a friend of mine is presiding or is going into the chair or something like that, and I want to support them. But otherwise, I normally don't.
I've always been a lobby lurker, and really honestly, you hang out in the lobby for a little bit, and then the rest of the time go hang out with people, go have lunch, down in Crystal City. Maybe scope out Amazon's HQ2. which would be right in the neighborhood. But really, you just go and you know go see the George Washington Masonic Memorial, go see the House of the Temple, take a tour. There's tons of stuff for you to do, and just hang out with brethren and enjoy yourself and have a good time. Yeah,
Cool.
I mean, you can't lose.
Yep. All right. Well, listen. Until next week, we're gonna try to be as regular as we can. Sunday nights at 7 p.m. Central, 8 p.m. Eastern. I should get like all the times, like, you know, what is it, Zulu time? You know, I don't know.
Right.
You know,
Right. Yeah.
we'll figure that out. Like what I need is like in X-Oriente Plaza here in Scotia.
It's true.
Like I need clocks like everywhere, you know, on the wall.
100%.
You know, Sao Paulo and,
Right.
you know, whatever. Anyway, until next time, thanks everybody. Fiat Vox, and we'll see you
Fiat
next
Vox,
week.
everybody. Good night.